loveless marriage. Just to make sure I could be with Lena every day.
On a pre-tape morning in August, on a set that millions of people treat like a second living room, Mark Consuelos said something that sounded, for a moment, like the beginning of a scandal. He told his wife of nearly 30 years, on live national television, that he would stay in a loveless marriage. Not for romance, not for family, for a dog. Her name is Lena, a Maltese and Shih Tzu mix the couple adopted back in 2021, and according to Mark Consuelos, she is the one non-negotiable clause in his marriage contract. It sounds like a joke, because it was a joke. But jokes like this, one, do not come from nowhere. They come from 30 years of history, 3 grown children, 1 very famous morning show, and a marriage that has quietly become one of the strangest, funniest, and most resilient partnerships in modern television. This is the story of how Mark Consuelos ended up joking about divorcing Kelly Ripa over a dog, and what that joke actually reveals about the two of them. The segment began, as these things often do, with a news story. Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos, co-hosts of Live with Kelly and Mark since 2023, were discussing a real piece of proposed legislation out of Pennsylvania, House Bill 97, which would change how pets are treated in divorce proceedings. Under the bill, animals would be considered more like family members than property, with courts asked to weigh factors similar to child custody: who provided daily care, who rescued the animal, and who, notably, did not want the pet to begin with. Kelly read through the details on air, explaining that the legislation was designed to give pets a kind of elevated legal status when a marriage ends. It was a fairly ordinary news segment, the kind daytime television runs constantly. But then Kelly turned the topic toward her own household, and Mark Consuelos, without much hesitation, delivered the line that would end up in headlines from Fox News to Entertainment Weekly to People magazine within hours. "I mean, listen, let's just put it this way," he said. "I would stay in a loveless marriage just to make sure I could be with Lena every day. That's how much I love Lena." Kelly Ripa, who has spent decades perfecting the art of the comedic beat, did not miss hers. She burst out laughing, then fired back immediately. "Is that all you're asking for, is a loveless marriage? Because that can be arranged." Then, for good measure, she added one final word for the audience: "Done." The exchange did not stop there. Consuelos, clearly enjoying the bit, pushed it further, saying that if he and Kelly ever separated and Lena ended up living with her, he would lie awake at night wondering what the dog was doing without him. Kelly, never one to let a straight line go unpunished, replied that he would probably lie awake wondering if some other man was petting her. The studio audience laughed. The clip went viral within hours, and across entertainment outlets, headlines ran with some version of the same idea. Mark Consuelos had just confessed, on live television, that his marriage might be loveless. Except that is not really what happened. What actually happened was something far more interesting than a scandal. It was a masterclass in how a long, real marriage talks about itself in public, and it revealed something about Mark and Kelly that has been building for almost 30 years. To understand why the joke landed the way it did, you have to understand who Lena actually is in the Consuelos household. She is not a new addition or a passing whim. The couple adopted her in March of 2021, and the story of how she joined the family says a lot about how Mark and Kelly operate as partners. Lena was originally featured on a pet adoption segment on Live, the kind of on-air moment meant to help a shelter animal find a home. Instead, according to reporting from People magazine, Kelly and Mark fell for the dog themselves during the broadcast and ended up adopting her. At the time, the family already had a dog named Chewy, a Shih Tzu the couple had adopted years earlier, also through a segment on the show, back in 2007. Kelly has said their children wanted to name the new puppy Leia, as a nod to Chewbacca from Star Wars, since they already had a Chewy. The name softened slightly into Lena, but the Star Wars logic behind it stuck as a piece of family trivia. The two dogs got along immediately, and Lena effectively became the household's second act, arriving just as the Consuelos children were reaching adulthood. That timing matters more than it might seem. Chewy died in 2025 at 17 years old, and the loss hit the family hard enough that Kelly Ripa cried on air while announcing it. She described Chewy as a dog who had been present for nearly every major chapter of their family's life, including raising their 3 children. As each one of our kids left for college and then moved out on their own, Chewy remained, Kelly said at the time, her voice breaking. Mark, sitting beside her, called it one of the toughest things they had faced as a married couple. That is not a small statement from a man who has been married for 3 decades. It tells you that in this household, the family dog is not treated as background scenery. She is treated as a member of the family, with real emotional weight attached to her presence and her absence. So when Mark Consuelos joked that he would tolerate a loveless marriage just to keep seeing Lena every day, he was not making light of something meaningless. He was exaggerating something the family already takes seriously, which is exactly how good comedy works. The joke only lands because the underlying attachment is real. To understand the confidence behind that kind of joke, you have to go back to how Mark and Kelly's relationship started in the first place, because it did not begin cautiously. It began on the set of All My Children, the long-running ABC soap opera where Kelly Ripa was already an established star playing Haley Vaughn. Mark Consuelos joined the show as Mateo Santos, and the two were cast opposite each other as an on-screen couple. What started as scripted chemistry moved into real life fast. The two eloped in Las Vegas on May 1st, 1996, marrying quickly and quietly, without the extended engagement or planning that often accompanies celebrity weddings. Their family grew almost immediately afterward. Their first child, Michael, was born in 1997, just a year after the wedding. Their daughter, Lola, followed in 2001, and their youngest son, Joaquin, was born in 2003. In other words, Mark and Kelly did not have years of quiet, private adjustment before starting a family. They built a marriage, a household, and 3 children essentially at the same time. They were building 2 separate careers in a notoriously unstable industry. That is a demanding way to start a life together, and it set the tone for the kind of partnership they would eventually become known for: fast-moving, blunt, and unafraid of pressure. Kelly's career took her from All My Children into an entirely different kind of television. She eventually became co-host of the syndicated talk show that would go through several names and several co-hosts over the years, first alongside Regis Philbin, and later through a series of high-profile partnerships and very public transitions. Through all of it, Kelly Ripa became one of the most durable and recognizable faces in American daytime television, a job that requires speed, timing, and the ability to make unscripted conversation feel effortless, morning after morning, for decades. Mark, meanwhile, continued building his own acting career, appearing in television and film projects, including a long run on Riverdale, while also becoming a familiar public figure in his own right as Kelly's husband. For years, he showed up on her show as a guest, a fill-in, or a recurring bit, without becoming a permanent fixture. Then, in 2023, that changed. Mark officially joined Live as Kelly's full-time co-host, transforming the show into Live with Kelly and Mark. That decision turned their marriage into something unusual, a full-time professional partnership, broadcast live, in addition to a personal one. Kelly Ripa's path to becoming Mark's full-time co-host was not a short or simple one, and understanding it helps explain why the eventual pairing carried so much weight. After leaving All My Children, Kelly stepped into daytime television as co-host alongside Regis Philbin, inheriting a chair on a show with an already established identity and an audience that did not automatically transfer its loyalty to a newcomer. She held that position for years, then navigated the show through Regis's retirement, a search for a permanent replacement, and eventually a long run alongside Michael Strahan, followed by Ryan Seacrest. Each transition came with its own public scrutiny, its own adjustment period, and its own risk that the show, and Kelly's position on it, would not survive the change in chemistry. It did survive repeatedly, because Kelly Ripa proved capable of adapting her on-air rhythm to a rotating cast of partners, while still keeping the show recognizably hers. That is a specific, difficult skill. Live daytime hosting does not allow for retakes or scripted safety nets. It rewards quick thinking, comfort with silence, the ability to recover from a joke that does not land, and enough personal charisma to keep an audience returning every weekday morning for decades. By the time Mark officially joined as a permanent co-host in 2023, Kelly had already spent the better part of 2 decades proving she could do all of that with a wide range of on-air partners. That history matters because it means Mark did not simply join his wife's show. He joined a format Kelly had already spent years mastering, stepping into a professional rhythm that was built well before he arrived at the desk full-time. Their off-air marriage gave them a head start in trust and familiarity that none of Kelly's previous professional partnerships had, but it also meant Mark had to learn, in real time and in public, a discipline his wife had already refined over multiple hosting eras. Several of their early on-air conversations touched on exactly that adjustment, with Mark openly acknowledging that Kelly's instincts for live television were sharper and faster than his own, built from years of practice he simply had not logged yet. It is worth pausing on how significant that shift actually was, because plenty of marriages would buckle under it. Working alongside a spouse every single day, on camera, in front of a national audience, adds a layer of pressure that most couples never have to test. There's nowhere to hide a bad morning. There's no separating home life from work life, because for an hour or more each weekday, they are the same thing. Mark has spoken candidly about how strange that adjustment was at first, noting in interviews that co-hosting changed the day-to-day intimacy of their marriage in ways he had not fully anticipated. He has also talked about smaller, more technical adjustments, like the habit, drilled into him as an actor, of never looking directly into the camera. On a live talk show, that instinct works against you constantly, and Mark has admitted it took him weeks to unlearn it, while Kelly, a veteran of live television, said it took her years when she made a similar transition from scripted acting into hosting. Those details might sound minor, but they say something real about the kind of adjustment involved in this stage of their marriage. Mark was not just becoming Kelly's co-host. He was stepping into her professional world, on her turf, under her rhythm, in a job built entirely around live, unscripted give and take. That requires trust. It requires a level of comfort with being interrupted, corrected, or teased in real time, without taking it personally. And it requires two people who already know each other well enough to make that exposure look natural instead of tense. That foundation is what makes the Lena joke work the way it does. A couple without that history could not deliver a line about a loveless marriage and have it read as funny rather than alarming. Mark and Kelly can, because their audience has spent years watching them banter, tease, and occasionally roast each other on live television, all while clearly remaining, unmistakably, a couple who like being around each other. Part of what makes Live with Kelly and Mark distinctive among morning shows is that Mark and Kelly do not perform a polished, softened version of marriage. Their on-air chemistry is sharper than that. They interrupt each other. They poke fun at each other's habits. They turn small domestic details, like who lets the dogs out in the morning, into on-air material. Kelly has noted on the show that one of the real logistical challenges of a two-person household with pets is simply making sure someone is available to handle the basics. A comment that sounds mundane until you realize it is exactly the kind of unglamorous detail most celebrity interviews leave out. Mark has also been candid, in more sincere moments away from the joking, about what actually holds the marriage together after so many years. Speaking to press around one of their wedding anniversaries, he pointed to shared family values as a foundation, noting that both he and Kelly come from families where their own parents stayed together, and that having 3 children of their own gave them a bond that extended well beyond romance alone. He described Kelly as patient and tolerant, qualities he credited as central to the marriage's longevity, and said plainly that it was nice to be married to his best friend. Those comments, made without a punchline attached, sit right alongside the Lena joke as two sides of the same relationship. One register blunt and comedic, the other quietly sincere, both consistent with a couple who have never needed to manufacture a single, polished narrative about their marriage. That willingness to be unpolished in public is not new for either of them. Kelly Ripa has a long history of blunt, off-the-cuff comments about her marriage that have occasionally generated their own headlines, including a widely discussed moment years earlier when she joked on air that Mark tends to be short-tempered immediately after intimacy, a comment that went viral enough that Mark ended up addressing it directly in a later broadcast, laughing it off while noting how strange it was to have people asking him about it while he was on a film set in another city. He clarified, with some amusement, that any perceived crankiness was more likely a byproduct of simply falling asleep. The point is not the specific joke. The point is the pattern. Mark and Kelly have never treated their marriage as something too fragile to joke about in public, even when those jokes occasionally get misread as more serious than intended. That same pattern showed up years before Lena, when a fan gave Kelly a life-sized body pillow of her husband during a taping, and she joked on air that the pillow was missing what she called its best part, since it only reproduced Mark from the waist up. It showed up again when internet critics questioned photos of Kelly in a bikini, prompting Mark to publicly and firmly defend her online, calling her the woman he most admires and praising her discipline and work ethic in a way that was unmistakably sincere underneath the playful tone. It showed up when trolls suggested Kelly looked too old to be with her husband, and she fired back with the exact kind of sharp, unbothered wit that has defined her hosting career for decades. Across all of these moments, a consistent shape emerges. Mark and Kelly treat their marriage as material, not as something to be protected behind a curated, always flattering public image. That is a deliberate choice, whether or not either of them would describe it that way. Plenty of celebrity couples opt for the opposite strategy, presenting a uniformly warm, conflict-free version of their relationship in every interview. Mark and Kelly have built their public brand on the alternative. Their appeal comes from feeling lived in rather than staged, which is precisely why a line like, "I would stay in a loveless marriage" reads as comedy rather than confession. It fits a pattern the audience already recognizes. There is another layer to the Lena joke worth examining, and it has to do with timing. Michael, Lola, and Joaquin are grown now, ages 29, 25, and 23 respectively, no longer requiring the daily logistics of school runs, homework, and supervision that once structured the family's routine. For years, Kelly built a significant part of her public identity around being a working mother, juggling a demanding hosting job with 3 children at home, often speaking candidly on air about the chaos of school mornings, sports schedules, and the general unpredictability of raising kids while also being famous. That stage of life is now behind them. Their children are adults with their own paths. And in interviews and on-air comments over the past couple of years, both Mark and Kelly have spoken about what it means to adjust to a quieter house after decades of a full one. It is a transition many parents recognize, sometimes described as an empty nest, and it often comes with an unexpected redistribution of attention and affection, frequently toward pets. Chewy occupied that role for years as the children grew older, and after her death in 2025, Lena has clearly stepped into a similar position within the family's emotional architecture. She is, in a very real sense, the current occupant of the household's most doted-on spot. Viewed that way, the joke about staying married for Lena is not really about Mark's feelings toward Kelly at all. It is a reflection of where the Consuelos household is right now. A couple whose children have moved into independent adulthood, whose day-to-day domestic routine now revolves significantly around a small rescue dog, and whose marriage has entered a stage where humor about that adjustment feels natural rather than uncomfortable. Many longtime married couples experience exactly this shift, even if very few of them get to discuss it on national television the next morning. None of this means Mark Consuelos was making a coded confession about unhappiness in his marriage, and treating it that way misreads both the segment and the 2 people involved. Everything about the exchange, from Kelly's immediate comedic timing to Mark's exaggerated follow-up about lying awake at night, signals a bit that both of them were fully in on together. Kelly's response, declaring the imaginary divorce done, and teasing him about another man petting the dog, was not the reaction of someone blindsided by a genuine confession. It was the reaction of a comedic partner catching a pitch and hitting it right back, the kind of rhythm that only develops after years, and in their case, decades, of live, unscripted back and forth. What the moment does reveal, accurately, is something less sensational but arguably more meaningful. After nearly 30 years of marriage, 3 children, 1 soap opera set where they met, 1 Las Vegas elopement, 2 family dogs, and a full-time professional partnership hosting a national morning show together, Mark and Kelly have built a relationship sturdy enough to withstand a joke like this without anyone involved actually worrying about what it means. That sturdiness does not come from avoiding conflict or softening every public statement into something safe. It comes from the opposite approach, a willingness to be blunt, teasing, and occasionally exaggerated in public because the underlying relationship is not actually at risk. Headlines calling the moment a confession or a deal breaker reveal more about how entertainment media covers celebrity relationships than they do about the Consuelos' marriage itself. A single joke about a dog, stripped of context, can be framed to look alarming. Placed back into the actual context, 30 years of marriage, a full-time working partnership, a shared history that includes real, on-air grief over losing a family pet. It reads as exactly what it was intended to be. A funny bit built on real affection, delivered by two people who know each other well enough to make that kind of joke without any real risk attached to it. It is worth remembering, too, that this was not the first time a stray comment from either of them turned into a viral headline that outpaced the substance behind it. Kelly's much-discussed remark years earlier about Mark's post-intimacy mood swings followed the exact same arc. An offhand, joking line on live television, amplified far beyond the studio, followed by a clarification from Mark that reframed the whole thing as far less dramatic than the headline suggested. The Lena exchange fits that same recurring pattern almost perfectly, right down to the eventual media cycle treating a throwaway bit as a serious relationship revelation. Recognizing that pattern is genuinely useful context for viewers trying to figure out how seriously to take any single soundbite pulled from a show built entirely around fast, unscripted, and frequently exaggerated banter between two people who have been legally and comedically committed to each other since the spring of 1996. If there's a genuine takeaway from the entire episode, it is not about hidden unhappiness. It is about how a long marriage between two public figures continues to function, adapt, and stay interesting after 3 decades. Mark and Kelly met inside a scripted world, built a real relationship faster than most people would recommend, raised 3 children while establishing separate careers, weathered Kelly's rise into one of the most recognizable hosts on American television, and eventually chose to work side by side every single day rather than keep their professional lives separate. Along the way, they adopted 2 dogs who each became, in their own time, central figures in the family's emotional life. None of that happens by accident, and none of it happens without a genuine partnership underneath the jokes. The Lena moment, rather than exposing some hidden crack in the marriage, actually demonstrates the opposite. It shows 2 people secure enough in almost 30 years together to turn an ordinary news segment about a Pennsylvania pet custody bill into a viral, laugh-filled bit about their own household, without either of them worrying for a second about how it might be interpreted. That kind of ease is not built overnight. It is built over 3 decades, 3 children, 2 beloved dogs, and a working partnership that has, by every available account, only gotten steadily more comfortable with time. Mark Consuelos did not admit that his marriage is loveless. What he actually revealed, in a single unscripted exchange with his wife of nearly 30 years, is how thoroughly built-in and battle-tested their relationship really is. Sturdy enough that a joke about staying together for the dog could become a viral headline without threatening anything real underneath it. If you enjoyed this closer, fact-based look at one of daytime television's longest-running and most publicly candid marriages, subscribe to the channel for more, and let us know in the comments below what you think has actually kept Mark and Kelly together for nearly 30 years.